Djerf Avenue has been in hot water recently for a few different scandals. From a copyright striking controversy to a scathing exposé revealing a toxic workplace, things don't seem to be going too well for the brand publicly. However, what I did not expect to find when I decided this may be a good case study of a modern-day celebrity brand was something far more interesting than just a brand rife with controversy. Djerf Avenue was founded in 2019, but its roots actually began back in 2016 when Matilda Djerf went viral for Instagrammed holiday shots of her and her partner Rasmus in the Caribbean. They weren't especially contradictory or controversial, but instead she mostly found fame for her hair, which was particularly desirable for similar women. This is a good factor to remember for a tidbit later on in the timeline. Matilda wasn't particularly wacky or offensive, and instead she became known for her authenticity, her relatability, and her attainably aspirational content, garnering thousands of followers for being, quote, a far cry from those of American peers such as Addison Rae or Charli D'Amelio. What sets Ms. Djerf apart is the devotion she engenders in her fans. Literally by only the following year, she was already seeing interest in the accessible fashion space through collaborations, namely with Ete Swimwear in 2017, then in 2018 collaborations with Sabo, Naked Fashion, and Gina Tricot, I think in that order. We can assume that these were financially very successful too, as by 2019, work had already begun on her own brand, Djerf Avenue. And actually, I have to admit, from the get-go, from a business perspective, the brand actually seemed to be quite interesting. You see, usually a celebrity brand would have a lifespan something like this. Their fan base usually achieves an early buzz and sales because they have a pre-established group of loyal fans. However, soon this hype usually dies down as either the brand becomes boring because the design or business doesn't really have a differentiator, or because the celebrity behind it starts becoming uncool. However, Djerf Avenue stood out in this regard because while it did have that initial buzz of being an influencer brand, it also had a genuine point of difference. There was a reason to buy into the brand even if you weren't a fan. Specifically, what I'm talking about is the way Djerf Avenue began by tackling the issue of overconsumption by planning for an unending product stock. They planned for their products to be unseasoned, thus available indefinitely as long as there was demand for it, directly tackling the modern-day consumer issue of fast fashion, that the never-ending turnover of stock is bad for the environment. Which, just to be really clear on the definition of fast fashion here, it does have absolutely nothing to do with quality or price, but it's actually defined by the speed at which new styles are stocked in the store. So despite the quality, it should be noted that it cannot be considered fast fashion if it doesn't have that fast turnover of stock. So, Djerf Avenue, in a nutshell, was a celebrity brand that was, at first, very explicitly not fast fashion. Was the quality any better than fast fashion? Absolutely not. Even this promotional video from her own YouTube channel can show you how quite cheap the tailoring in particular looks, but that's not the point. So was it any cheaper than fast fashion? Also no, absolutely not. In fact, much like celebrity brands before it, it included the influencer's cultural value in the price tag, meaning it was fittingly more expensive than the like product from, say, Zara, but yet equal to the value provided by Matilda Djerf. But that also wasn't the point. In fact, the point happened to be twofold. On the first fold, it gave her current audience a way to experience the community of her celebrity fandom in a tangible way, materializing their enjoyment through parasocial relationships. And the second fold is that it filled a gap in the market for semi-ethical consumption where the unsold pieces wouldn't go to landfill just because they didn't sell within a short period of time. It is truly a genuinely smart point of view for a brand and is a luxury in today's climate to feel like you're buying into something good, all while offering security to the consumer that validates their taste will be timeless. Of course, that in itself cannot be true. Timelessness in fashion does not exist. Everything, even basics, go through a trend cycle. But like I often say, facts are not really reality. It's the perception of what is true that is true. And considering Matilda's audience is already somewhat similar to the customers of, say, Zara, H&M, and COS, one can assume that the bulk of her audience aren't at the forefront of cutting-edge fashion, but still like to be well presented. It's almost like the 2020s version of Christian Girl Autumn, by which I mean every single person at the same time was convinced that this look was timeless and fashionable, but now in hindsight, it looks a little dated. It's not really timeless. It's intended for the people who are looking for that feeling of belonging, not necessarily the feeling of standing out, but they still want to look good. So, this brand materializes Matilda's personal, considerably normal style very well. It validates their target audience's style and is therefore very valuable. It also happens that the first collection was called Basics, which also simultaneously allows a simple design style with a perception that the style will be in trend for longer, regardless of if that's actually true or not. So really quickly on my lovely 4 Ps, the product was cheaply made, but good for the poaching of the Zara-going audience. The price was a reasonable price point, high enough to be aspirational, but cheap enough to be accessible. Which leaves us to look at promotion and place. In terms of place, it was sold online, probably just because that was really her only option at the time. It's not great because it does usually mean a high return rate, but considering the way that she had spoken about the collection in promotional material being good even if it's oversized, we can assume that that may have mitigated some of the return rate, as well as people don't tend to return things as quickly if they have that parasocial relationship with the person selling it. So it wasn't the best, but without outside financing, this is probably the best that they could do. This does, however, now bring us on to promotion, which is arguably the most important piece of the early success of Djerf Avenue. We spoke earlier about how Djerf was known for her relatability. Well, that was because on her Instagram, she famously didn't edit any of her photos. The first drop, which was on the 6th of December 2019, was shot modelless, while it was in the second drop, which is the video that I've been showing you thus far from January 2020, in which she very cleverly tied in this extension of their ethical marketing, beginning with the no landfill stance and using the second drop only to restock existing styles, but now offering the clothes in the size range extra small to extra large, something that doesn't sound like a lot to a consumer today, but on the production side is about double the cost of a regular small, medium, large run. This would have been very, very costly for a small business that had no backers. From the production side, this was very purposeful and very effortful, even to the point that I really thought the brand was perhaps private labeling their products, which means buying pre-made goods and sticking their name on it, or they were purchasing from unsold stock because of how pricey this kind of a size range can be for someone that's only actually been in her profession for about 3 years. Now, you know me, I go a little bit too far with the research sometimes, and I ended up having a friend of mine contact the Trade Commissioner of Portugal in New York to dig a little deeper, and actually, currently I have nothing to report. I do still find the quality of the actual product that they sell to be surprisingly low for production facilities in Portugal, Italy, and Spain, where they claim everything is made. To me, personally, it looks more like it was made in Turkey, perhaps, which isn't a read, but it's more in line with high street brands that I see that they compare with. But obviously I'm wrong, they do have their factories listed on their website, even still to this day, very, very respectably. Instead, they are probably just purposefully overpaying on production to be able to use those made-in tags, something that they are using quite heavily in promotional materials already. I mean, either that or they're actually just sewing the garments elsewhere and then having them finished in Portugal, Italy, and Spain so that they can use the made in tag totally and 100% legally. Many brands do this, even luxury brands. Again, it's not a read. Even if it is true, might not be, just my thought. So, to come back to the 4 Ps, all in all, this was genuinely a very good launch for the brand. It had a very good initial audience, it had a true point of difference from the business perspective, a good ethical marketing campaign to create a further encouragement of emotional bonding with consumers, in which I'm including all of the things like her quotes about how hard she worked for the launch, that they don't call themselves sustainable because that's subjective, and that they championed all their clothes should have a purpose. Basically, this 7/8 piece collection was genuinely really good from a business perspective. She might say that, quote, it was never about identifying a gap in the market, but of course it was. She had seen something she wanted in the market, namely slow fashion, couldn't find it, and made it for her audience. That's exactly what filling a gap looks like. And it's only really giant retailing nerds like myself that give names to it, like filling a gap in the market. She might downplay it, but the launch was really brilliant. By April, they had hired Agnes Djerf, their relative, out from her job at Stylin, which is like a Swedish version of COS, to help with their product promotion, and in PR pieces had doubled down on their ethical stance in media like Vogue, L'Officiel, the New York Times, major publications, which over time basically all repeat the same thing. Actually, to be honest, it reads more like press releases than actual reviews or commentary on the brand, to be honest. But at least it did get across that they expanded size ranges to extra, extra small to extra, extra, extra large, that they used a tiny marketing budget at 2 to 5% of revenue, thanks to her influence garnering user-generated content, which is basically the modern-day equivalent of reviews. Of course, most of these were coming from fans and going to fans, making somewhat of an echo chamber of compliments about the quality and the price of the product, something that we will obviously come back to. But it was fundamental in building that foundational strength in a core audience. By the end of the first year in business, they had taken $2 million in revenue. In 2021, they expanded into swimwear, was employing 18 people, and reported between $8 and $12 million in sales. By 2022, they expanded into the long-promised resale channel, reducing on waste, reducing on returns, and reducing the desire for resellers to hike the price up on eBay thanks to Djerf Avenue's price cap. They were now up to 10 drops per year, encroaching on that fast fashion space a little bit. They opened a logistics warehouse in the US, their biggest market, as is still today, and revenue was set to hit $22 million for the year 2022. Also, something else to note is that in the same year, 2022, they told the New York Times that they sold a 10% stake of the company to an angel investor who I simply couldn't find any information on. Unfortunately, Djerf Avenue has never mentioned this investor again. Perhaps they're under an NDA. So it's unclear if they are still involved in the company or even if it is true. But it piqued my interest as this fact is literally only mentioned in this one piece that itself stuck out as it's the only article in all of this time that doesn't really read like a fluff piece or a piece written by a fan. Something that, quite frankly, was really frustrating in researching for this video. I've already mentioned it once before. It's only just because for a brand that promotes itself as authentic, it almost seems ironic that none of the media surrounding it feels honest at all. Especially when coming from almost exclusively major publications like Elle, L'Officiel, Business Insider, and Vogue. Big publications, little brand, very early on in the brand's lifespan, 99% fluffy positive pieces. It's certainly unusual. Anyway, I digress because the brand at this point really did have a very strong, loyal following, and rightfully so. It's well conceived, the brand truly nurtured their existing customers so well using social media. They continued using user-generated content on their platforms to both show off their own diversity ethics and reward their most loyal customers. They also began adding fans to their close friends list on Instagram and doing Instagram lives around the office to encourage that parasocial relationship. Interestingly, it's also specifically at this time that they began really pushing the quality of their product as a selling point, specifically promoting their use of Corozo buttons, recycled polyester, and semi-synthetics like cupro and viscose. All of which is greenwashing, by the way. Recycled polyester is very, very bad for the environment. It breaks that closed-loop cycle of polyester, meaning that despite it previously having the ability to before it cannot be recycled any further. Where Corozo buttons, cupro, and viscose are all semi-synthetics, which are equally bad for the environment as just ordinary polyester. It's the same complaint that I had with Botta when I covered their brand. It's fine to use the fabrics that you need to get your margins or even to get the look that you're aiming for. It's just risky to promote yourself as ethical while doing so because it creates a level of expectation which is very hard to meet. And this was already starting to happen. Because of their ethical standpoint being so front and forward with the brand, and especially because of the parasocial relationship on which the brand was founded, customers began to expect more than the brand could provide. To long quote a Reddit user, XOXOXO Borscht XOXOXO, she said, quote, "Every time I've spoken to upper management in Sweden, including Agnes, the production manager, and Matilda herself, they have just been as bad, if not worse, than the American customer service team. So unwilling to help and shifting the blame onto you and gaslighting instead of taking accountability for their mistakes and/or quality issues. Like you said, I also think Matilda is just in it for the money, which makes it obvious that the problem is very deep-rooted in the management and culture of the company and has nothing to do with the individual customer service team members. I think the way they run their business is very immoral and unethical, ironic. They rely heavily on FOMO and scarcity marketing, gaslighting customers and preying on younger consumers by marketing their clothes in a way that makes it seem like if you buy them, you're buying a lifestyle and can be like Matilda and achieve her lifestyle. New York Times article described this well. They use buzzwords like ethical and sustainable to attract attention, yet do nothing to live up to those claims and deny those words were ever used when confronted. They flat out lie about not having stock of things and then surprise restock with hundreds of stock a couple of days later. They released a highly anticipated item before the time they said they would and then blamed people who missed out, saying it's their fault they weren't on the waiting list, which didn't even work. It's shocking how much they get away with and still have thousands of naive consumers complaining they're revolutionary and the most genuine brand out there, and that Matilda is the most authentic and real influencer out there who finally actually cares about her customers. It's all a big scam, and it really sucks because I, like I'm sure a lot of other people, really like the designs of the items, and a lot of them really are staple functional wardrobe pieces. It's just really disappointing that we are pretty much pawns in funding Matilda's extremely luxurious lifestyle and don't even get the benefit of high-quality, long-lasting clothing or reliable customer service in return. Honestly, this isn't the customer's fault. They were led to believe in the brand to the extent they expected all of this and more. But it's also not really Djerf Avenue's fault either. Without the ethical standpoint, the brand would not have been special enough for the buzz to have continued on the upwards trajectory as it had for the several years after its foundation. In this sense, expectations are just a difficult thing to manage. For one to sell any product, a brand must create expectation. But in order to meet that expectation, they can only ever see that with diminishing returns. Especially for a brand that is direct-to-consumer and sold online, no less by using the drop method, which obviously encourages impulse purchasing due to the limited availability window. This is something that, according to the countless studies that I do not remember the name of from my dissertation, which was on impulse purchasing, by the way, has some of the highest levels of regret and disappointment. Effectively, They are using a promotional and a sales model that's needed to create compounding sales, but that also puts them at high risk of complaints. It's a balancing act which seemingly they were already beginning to lose at only 2 and a bit years into foundation. In 2023, they hired, I believe, their first full-time product developer, Emily Thylander, straight from H&M. They released their first collab collection with Sophia Richie, which is, in my opinion, a great choice for the target market of their brand. Their core audiences have, I expect, a very large crossover. And importantly, they began producing pop-up stores to allow customers to really see and experience the products in real life, while simultaneously creating hype and interest in a retail setting. This also came with their first and I think only catwalk show thus far, held in the Guggenheim Museum, with their most loyal fans as the invitees, again doubling down on that customer retention plan from before, with Djerf saying to L'Officiel, quote, "We have this really amazing and transparent communication with our customers, and I know they feel like they're part of a family, and for us, they really are our extended family, and I think that's something people crave." However, mere months after this, their biggest controversy thus far reared its ugly head. The company was found to be copyright striking other people's content for promoting dupes of their products, even in some cases where the creators were decrying the dupes sold on Amazon as inferior to the original. This was an act of punching down, and it did not go over well in her fan base's online space, primarily because of something I mentioned before. The Djerf Avenue online fanbase were already a well-cocooned echo chamber of reviews coming from fans to fans. So because they were now punching down into that, it meant that a good number of these people, firstly, were big fans of Djerf, secondly, were actively saying the dupes were bad, so it looked like they weren't actually listening to the things that they were complaining about, and thirdly, it was obvious that they were coming just for regular people, not for creators or brands, but normal people who just wanted to support Matilda Djerf. So this action really bit the hand that fed them, and in such a well-oiled echo chamber as they had, it came back very, very hard. Quickly, fans turned on Djerf Avenue, pointing out that the designs were specifically very unoriginal. Quote, "Users on TikTok have been quick to point out that the blue Le Apt shirt Djerf wore in June 2019, which is virtually inseparable in likeness to the breezy shirt Djerf Avenue then released in 2021. In 2021, Djerf wore a pair of silk green trousers courtesy of Jacques Swim. In 2022, Djerf Avenue released a very similar pair, which it called its Dream Pants. A pair of khaki vintage trousers Djerf initially posted to her Instagram in 2019 were reimagined in 2021 and released under Djerf's label as its go-to pants in 2021. Like, Miss Girl, your brand is literally dupes from your favorite clothes from other brands, one TikToker wrote. The TikToker here was GDSFV World. I don't know why the article doesn't credit her specifically, but either way, her fans were right. The designs are unspecial. You can very easily get similar product at a number of other stores. In a way, it reminds me of the influencer that's currently suing another influencer for copying their content, while someone in the comment section wrote something along the lines of, "You can't copyright beige." Because frankly, these are not special designs. They're very ordinary, and they are not especially well made either. But they also don't need to be, because that's actually not, thus far, what their customer had been demanding. I mean, they were, but only to a certain level. No one knows how to look for quality at a higher level than they're currently aware of, by which I mean a regular customer that has no concept of textile or garment construction, i.e. they don't sew, is unlikely to make a fuss about the current level of quality in Djerf Avenue if left unprovoked, especially because there are many of these customers with a parasocial connection with Matilda specifically. Instead, the actual differentiator in Djerf Avenue was a perceived differentiator based on the speed of restocking. It was a brilliant way of taking something that she cannot keep up with, fast fashion's quick turnover, the speed of fast fashion, if you will, and reframing their shortcoming as a positive for their audience. Genuinely, I do think that's brilliant. But when the design of the brand is based on the masses in that way and is so easily replaced, it can never be truly special. So, how good is their perceived differentiator when without the celebrity endorsement, the product wouldn't be desirable in the first place? You see, really the problem here wasn't the fact that the product was badly made or that it's an inflated price or that the design was bland. That's not the problem at all. The problem was disappointment. It's very hard to build and maintain customer trust in a brand, but it's very, very, very easy just to break it. So for the brand to punch into the fan base instead of at the counterfeiters was poor judgment, and it cost the brand dearly. So dearly, in fact, that by the following year, only about a month ago now, very few people comparatively came to their defense in their second major scandal. So before we do get onto that, you should know that in 2023, they reported around $35 million in revenue. In March 2024, they released a hair care line, something far more on brand for Matilda Djerf's personal brand, but of course, with less connections in the beauty space, it makes sense to launch in fashion first to scope demand. In June, they had a collab with Frankie's Bikinis, did more pop-ups, including one in London's Covent Garden, and in early December released a collab with Rhode Cosmetics, who I actually do have a video on my beauty channel, highly recommend that, which is also perfect for her audience. So they were in the process of recovery and seemingly doing quite well for it. At least that was before the most recent scandal. Because only a mere few days after the Rhode collab launch and still in December 2024, a scathing article was published by Aftonbladet in which both current and previous employees of the business accused Matilda specifically of fostering a very unhealthy and toxic workplace environment. They accused Matilda specifically of bullying in the workplace, creating a hierarchy of her favorite employees, of not embodying the ethos of her online persona, of being fatphobic and opportunistic when sharing photos of the team online in order to create an everyone is welcome appearance on their platforms, which these employees say is fake. This, of course, is really truncating the accusations into just a paragraph, but needless to say, it went down very, very badly with her audience. That trust that had been so necessary for the brand to be built on was diminished greatly. Matilda Djerf, in the eyes of her fans, was not who she said she was. Soon, she deleted her personal TikTok account and offered an apology over Instagram, but it didn't really stop the onslaught of criticism coming her way. And yet, for the business specifically, there was still a silver lining. Their perceived point of difference. While Matilda is taking all of the heat for this controversy currently, which is importantly targeted very specifically at her instead of the business, thanks to the fact that many of the participants still work there, they do actually have another leg to stand on. Because Djerf Avenue isn't only a celebrity-endorsed merch line. Actually, Djerf Avenue as a concept is a commentary on overconsumption and fast fashion. It's effectively the clothing version of The Body Shop or Lush. So, it does actually seem like they may be able to weather this. Perhaps like Tati Westbrook did with her brand, Matilda will have to step back from the brand for a while or do a whole campaign about how she's changed as a person. But even without her, there is certainly a chance that the brand could survive. Because as judgmental as I've been about how common the design of the pieces are, the fact of the matter is there are a hell of a lot more people who aspire to dress like this than there are who desire to be truly unique with their style of dressing. So it well targets a large consumer group that is looking for that sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. And like it or not, until this point, they were phenomenally good community builders for specifically this group of people. Currently, the brand isn't special in design or quality or price, but it is special in their community and in their point of view. slow, mindful consumption. So, as long as they can retain their core customers and don't go into the red too much, they definitely do stand a chance at survival. It's not hopeless quite yet. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do like and subscribe. Click here to see that road video on my beauty channel that I spoke of, and a special thank you goes out to my patrons over on Patreon, some of whose names are on the screen now. All content used in this video is done so in accordance with the principles of fair use. However, if you have any concerns, please contact me directly at contact@understitch.co.uk.